So the plan has been drawn up. It's been submitted to Iran by intermediaries from Pakistan. Pakistan offering to use that plan as a basis for negotiations between Washington and Tehran. This is the Trump administration's 15-point ceasefire proposal, coming as Iran has said that non-hostile vessels can now make their way through the crucial Strait of Hormuz, as though an Iranian military spokesman said of the negotiations that the US is negotiating with itself. Well, let's hear then from Donald Trump.
The fact that they're talking to us and they're talking sense. And remember, it all starts with they cannot have a nuclear weapon. Just, I said yesterday, they said, what are the top 10? I said, well, number 1, 2, and 3 is they can't have a nuclear weapon. And they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. And we're talking about that. And I don't want to say in advance, but they've agreed they will never have a nuclear weapon. They've agreed to that.
US President Donald Trump there. So lots of contradicting, really, comments coming from both the US and Iran about possible talks. Kethevane Gorjestani, International Affairs Editor, is with me. Kethevane, where do things stand then?
Well, look, when you listen to the U.S. president, it seems that talks are ongoing, that they're making progress. We even know who is involved in those talks, not only Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, but also now, according to the U.S. president, the vice president, J.D. Vance, as well as the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. When it comes to the Iranian side, we're not even sure who exactly would be in those so-called negotiations that the U.S. claims are underway. There have been several names going around, but nothing confirms. And that's because the Iranians simply deny that negotiations are actually ongoing. They're saying that there are contacts, that they're open to talks, but they're not saying that there are any talks actually happening right now. So that's the first contradiction. Then there's this question of the 15-point plan. On Monday, when Donald Trump was talking about this, he made it seem like these 15 points were points of agreement, progress made with the Iranians. But now when you look at the reporting in U.S. media, what those 15 points could be, dismantling 3 of the major nuclear sites, ending enrichment on Iranian soil, suspending the ballistic program, stopping the support for proxies. All of those things are things that were in negotiations months ago and have not really moved anywhere forward. The only thing that seems to have been added possibly is the question, of course, of the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. One thing that is not there is the question of possible regime change. And that is because Donald Trump yesterday was saying, well, since we've basically killed most of the leadership and new people have come into these positions, it's kind of a regime change. Those people who have replaced those who have been killed are not exactly a new regime. They're simply new figures of that same regime. When it comes to the Iranians, though, they are not only denying that talks are going on, but they're really insisting on the fact that they are not willing to make any type of concessions, to give any leeway to the Americans. Let's take a listen to the spokesperson for the Iranian military.
The strategic power you used to talk about has turned into strategic failure. Anyone claiming to be a global superpower would have already gotten out of this mess if it could. Don't dress up your defeat as an agreement. Your era of empty promises has come to an end. Have your internal conflicts reached the point where you're negotiating with yourselves? We state this clearly, until it is our will, nothing will go back to the way it was. That will only come about when the very thought of acting against the Iranian nation is completely wiped from your corrupt minds.
When you listen to the two sides, it brings a lot of skepticism to whether or not these talks are even going to be held, will happen, maybe in Pakistan. We don't really know. The question really is, why is Donald Trump touting this progress in the negotiations? There are two options, really. One is that the U.S. president sees that he's under pressure at home. It's not popular, this war. Prices are rising. There is growing pressure for him to end this, but end it with a victory. So maybe he's looking for an off-ramp to be able to say, look, we have a deal with the Iranians. We won. We can get out of there. The other option, of course, is that Donald Trump is simply buying some time.
Yeah, another element pointing to the fact that Donald Trump might be buying time is the US military build-up, perhaps in the region, Kethevane?
Yes, we're now getting several concurring U.S. media reports that the Pentagon is about to order the Army's 82nd Airborne Division to be deployed in the Middle East. We don't exactly know how many of those soldiers would be deployed. Some of the reports talk about 1,000, others 2,000, others 3,000, but they would come from the immediate response force, meaning that these are soldiers that can be deployed anywhere in the world within about 18 hours. We also don't know where they would be going to. That has not been detailed or reported in the U.S. media. This comes on top of the announcements or the signs that there were two different groups, units of Marines that were on their way to the Middle East, bringing a total of around 5,000 Marines, plus the 1,000 to 3,000 of those soldiers. If all of this is confirmed, that's quite a lot of a military buildup in the Middle East for someone who wants to make a peace plan or have a ceasefire. The White House is insisting that this is sort of a way of building a maximum flexibility for Donald Trump to decide whatever he wants to do. It also obviously is a way to put pressure on Iran and give the Americans a little bit of leverage to show the Iranians, if you're not willing to negotiate, here we are right at your doorstep, ready to engage. Donald Trump, however, has multiple times said he doesn't want troops on the ground, though he hasn't ruled it out. And that could be a potential outcome of this military buildup. As I was saying, we don't have exactly the location towards which these soldiers and Marines are headed. But when you look at what the experts are saying, two options, two locations that could be interesting for the U.S. military would be one, Kharg Island, which is at the top, at the north of the Persian Gulf. We've talked about that island many times because the U.S. bombarded the military sites on that island. It is the biggest oil exportation hub for the Iranians. The second strategic location would be the port of Bandar Abbas, which is, as you can see, right on the coast in the Strait of Hormuz. So that would be a potential opening for the Americans to try to secure the Strait of Hormuz. Other people are even talking about the potential of going deep into Iran to get back that enriched uranium, but those are really much more far off and much more complicated to achieve. One thing is for certain is that the Iranians are preparing for that exactly, and it's not just because they're seeing this military buildup, it's also because they've seen what has happened over the past few months. On February 28th, that weekend, they were supposed to be some talks. In the end, the U.S. and Israel struck Iran before those talks could happen. Flashback also to last summer, in June of 2025, there were also reports of potential talks. Instead, you had the beginning of the 12-day war. So the Iranians know that negotiating or opening negotiations with the Americans does not protect you from a possible military operation by the Americans. So the Iranians are probably getting ready for exactly that. Whether or not it will happen, that is something that nobody probably knows. Probably Donald Trump himself hasn't even decided fully yet.